Morning world, it's the 18th of June 2019 and this is the first of two videos I'm going to be doing today. A little bit of postmodernist alchemy here, says with a grin on his face. I've done this before a few times, but this is the 2019 version. One of the, long ago, not so long ago, a couple of years ago, I found myself with time to spare in a beautiful city in central Austria called Salzburg. And I found myself just wandering. And I found a really old church and I went into the cemetery and I found a lot of really ancient tombs marked with the skull and crossbones, which in them days, of course, was a mark of power. And then in one corner, I found a tomb of, what was his name? I remember his surname, von Hockenheim, but he was more commonly known as Paracelsus, one of the greatest alchemists of all time. And adjacent to that tomb, someone had very thoughtfully left a red rose. Now, the rose is one of the greatest symbols of alchemical transformation and transmutation. So here, once again, for about the fourth time, is the 2019 take on the rose. The rose starts with a seed. A seed, that's all, just a seed. And it's laying dormant in the earth and it's surrounded by dark, nurtured, warm, but not really alive, just a seed. And then the heat of the sun comes with a little bit of moisture and the seed grows and expands and then it cracks and a shoot comes out. And the seed begins to grow. Up until that time, it is an individual. It is warmed by the sun and it grows. This is the core root. This is the soul, the initial spark. This is the sun. The seed flourishes and nurtures and it grows into the undergrowth. Tendrils come out, both going down, digging for roots of water, and growing up in towards the warmth and the light. And then the seeds come above the surface and they turn from white into green. And these tendrils then develop foliage and a little shrubbery forms. And this represents the moon, the nurturing, the seclusion, the feeling, the warmth, the hugging, the cuddles, the feeling of feeling secure and putting in place roots and foundations. Once the foliage is established and the roots are in place, then this plant then begins to suddenly shoot up a stem. And this is Mercury, the sudden surge from, say, age 7 through to about age 18, where there's a sudden growth spurt. The stalk shoots up, one or two leaves come up, and this is the gangly side of life. This is where people suddenly grow and expand, not so much in terms of emotion, but to an extent intellectually, but certainly physically. Then once the growth of the shoot has begun to slow down, a flower bulb begins to form at the top of the shoot. And this is Venus, and this is perhaps the time of 21 to 28 years old. The flower bulb slowly expands and expands and expands. It's still very green, it's unripe. Because Venus is all about the promise, the temptation, the love, but the unrequited love. And then as the bulb begins to really grow, so the top edge of it really begins to open up and you can just get the hint of the red leaves lying inside. It's a very feminine symbol. And then the rose opens, bang. Over the period of 28 to 35 years old, this is relating to Mars. Mars comes out and bang, you've got the rose. Strong, vibrant, really resplendent in its glory, giving off a maximum of scent and aroma. It's at its strongest. It's at its most virile. 35 to 42, then the rose becomes the Jupiter energy, where it gets big, bigger. And then the leaves begin to sort of start losing their vibrancy and it really expands and the aroma begins to fade away. At which point you move into the Saturn phase, and this will be 42 to 49 in terms of age. This is where the leaves fall off and the fragrance disappears. And it's somewhere around this age, around the end of the Saturn phase and the beginning of the Uranian phase, that you've got the interlude of Chiron, when the rose realises that it's no longer going to have the virility of youth, and it's got to prepare now for a transformation and a transmutation into something different. And this happens at the Chiron return around age 51. From 49 to 56, you have the phase of Chiron and where it just basically loses its shape and begins to accept the fact that it's entered middle age and that it's getting older and it can no longer be as vibrant as it was. Then you move on to the Uranian phase, 56 to 63, when all of a sudden there'll be a thunderstorm or a lightning strike or a strong wind or a dog walking by or a human just knocking it down, and the rose suddenly collapses into pieces. The stalk breaks, the rose collapses, falls to the ground, what's left of it begins to disintegrate into different bits. At which point you enter the Neptunian phase, where Neptune then dissolves all of the remaining pieces of the rose, and it just, the bacteria eat it away, the mould grows, and it dissolves back into the earth. And then there's the core seed at the centre of the rose which is left, and that's where Pluto comes in, because the rose then slips back into the underworld, into the dark, waiting for the sun to come again in the next season. Life and death, death and life, eternal cycles, never really dying, always eternal life really, but changing each time and slowly evolving, progressing and growing. Lovely metaphor for life. We're all our own individual roses. Catch you later, world. Bye.